After seeing so many debates and comments on my videos about the fairness of Squid Game, especially regarding the glass bridge game, I decided to make a video where I explain in more depth why the glass bridge was actually a fair game. I know this will likely be one of my most disliked videos, but please keep an open mind about what I am going to say and be willing to see things from another perspective. I will not discuss the symbolism of Squid Game or how the entire show is a meditation on capitalism and how none of the games were actually fair, like how tug of war is unfair to women or how the marble game is unfair to the unpaired player. That topic is for another video. The glass bridge was in fact a fair game, and here's why. When people say this game was unfair, they are only referring to the game itself. However, the game didn't actually start there. It started when the players had to choose a number. The problem is that people confuse fairness with luck. These are two different concepts that do not contradict each other. A game can be fair, yet a player can be very unlucky while playing it. Let's take the simplest example, flipping a coin. Each flip has a 50-50 chance, but a player could still get tails 10 times in a row. Or consider Monopoly. Everyone starts with the same amount of money, but one player might keep landing on taxes and opponents' properties, while others land on free spaces or buy prime real estate. At this point, you might argue that it wasn't the player's fault they landed on taxes, it was just bad dice rolls. But this doesn't mean Monopoly is unfair, nor does it mean the coin flip is unfair. The player simply had terrible luck. The same thing happened in the glass bridge game. People argue that the players did not have the same chances of winning, and that those who went early were doomed to die. However, this only applies once you learn what the game is actually about. Before the game was revealed, when players were tasked with picking a number, they all had the same chances of winning. The numbers weren't pre-assigned. Each player chose their own number, their own luck, just like in the Dalgona game. So why do people claim the glass bridge was unfair, but not Dalgona? In both cases, the organizers did the exact same thing. They told players to pick a shape or a number, and only afterward did they reveal what the game was. For those arguing that it wasn't fair because they didn't disclose what the numbers represented, are you serious? Have you ever played a game before? Telling players what the numbers meant beforehand would be like playing hide and seek where the seeker already knew everyone's hiding spots. If players had known what their choice meant in advance, they would have fought to avoid the first spots, completely ruining the game experience. There are countless examples of this concept. A lottery, where the winning numbers are known in advance. A lottery is exciting because no one knows which numbers will be drawn. If players knew the winning numbers beforehand, everyone would pick them, and the game would break down. Musical chairs, but everyone knows when the music will stop. If players knew exactly when to sit, the game wouldn't work as intended. The glass bridge was designed as a fair game, even if some people don't want to accept that. The high death toll wasn't due to unfairness, it was due to bad luck, fighting, and poor memory. With 18 panels and a 50-50 guess each time, the expected number of deaths would be around 7 and 11, leaving about 8 or 9 survivors. With 16 players, you would expect 5 to 9 winners, with 7 survivors being the most likely outcome. In the Squid Game, the challenge reality show, 12 out of 20 players survived the glass bridge. This was because they weren't allowed to push each other, and no one lost a player due to someone running too fast for others to remember the correct tiles. One interesting thing I noticed about the glass bridge is that it may have been one of the rare oversights in the game's design. After the tug-of-war round, there were 40 players left. The doctor was executed for having an unfair advantage, reducing the count to 39. Han Min-yo was left out of the marble game, making the player count for that game 38. Since the marble game eliminates half of the players, there should have been 19 survivors. With Han Min-yo still alive, the total count should have been 20. However, when they return after the marble game, the sign shows only 17 players alive, meaning 3 pairs failed to complete the game, resulting in 3 extra deaths. Player 069 then kills himself overnight, reducing the count to 16 players. Here's the problem. There were 18 tiles on the glass bridge, suggesting it was originally set up for 20 players. If they had started with 20, then even if every single tile broke, at least 2 players would have been guaranteed to reach the end for the final game. But things didn't work out that way. Perhaps it was too late to adjust the bridge. For those who argue that the first players were guaranteed to die while the last ones were guaranteed to succeed, and that this was unfair, consider this. What if the glassmaker had been the first to go? We saw that he had the skill to determine which tiles were tempered and which were not, meaning he could have crossed the bridge without dying. The problem, however, is that it would have taken him a long time to do so. If the glassmaker had gone first, the real disadvantage would have shifted to the players who chose to go last, because they wouldn't have made it in time. The tiles would have exploded before they could cross. I'm not going to discuss the front man turning off the lights, because that was not originally part of the game. It was done purely for the VIPs. Again, this ties into the show's capitalism symbolism, which I won't debate in this video. However, I will say that, yes, it was unfair that they interfered. Every game had loopholes that players used to their advantage, like hiding behind others or licking the Dalgona shape. I'm sure the frontman wouldn't have intervened if not for the VIPs. Based on all of this, the glass bridge was actually a fair game, even if some people don't want to admit it. The marble game was also largely based on chance, at least if played as intended. If it helps, think of the glass bridge game not as crossing the bridge itself, but as choosing the right number beforehand. That was the real game. As I stated earlier, the main issue comes from people confusing luck with fairness. These are two different concepts that do not contradict each other. At the end of the day, the glass bridge game was never about simply making it across. It was about the choice players made before they even stepped onto the bridge. The game was fair in its design, even if luck played a huge role in the outcome. It's understandable why people feel like the game was unfair. Seeing so many players fall to their deaths, especially those who went first, makes it easy to mistake bad luck for an unfair system. But that's the nature of games that incorporate chance. You can make a fair game where not everyone has an equal outcome. Squid Game is all about playing with these ideas, making us question what we think is fair and unfair. But if you break it down, the glass bridge followed the same logic as the Dalgona game, or even the lottery. Players made their choices without knowing what they were in for. And in that sense, it was just as fair as any other game in the competition. So, what do you think? Does this change your perspective on the glass bridge game, or do you still think it was unfair? Let me know in the comments.